Just keep on getting the food. I'm going to join you in a minute. But anyway, I want to welcome everybody to the session this morning. You know, it's great to see this many people show up. Assessment is really important to how we measure that we're doing what we say we're doing. And there's going to be lots of different ways, I think, to try to look at that. But I think it's going to be a great session this morning. And as we move forward and try to implement more ways of assessing both at the program level, at the CSLOs, Common Student Learning Outcomes levels. I know all the acronyms these days, and I forget what they stand for. But welcome, everybody. I think this is going to be a great session, and you know, it always helps when they provide food, doesn't it? So that's good. So welcome and have a good session. Now comes the entertainment portion.
While we're waiting for everyone to finish getting their food, we're just going to read the ground rules. Please turn off your cell phones. Get your food quickly so we can begin. If you need a personal break, just go and return quietly. There are none built in. And please do not participate in side conversations. Okay, while the last of the stragglers get their food, we are going to go over briefly how you use the clickers. The clickers are going to be an integral part of the first part of this section. So, at everybody's place, you should find a clicker, the little plastic doodad with buttons. On the bottom of the clicker is an on-off switch. When you press that, you should get a little blue light indicating your clicker is working. Everybody should turn their clickers on. Turn it on. Now, you'll note the clicker also has a series of buttons associated with letters, A, B, C, etc. These are going to be the choices that you'll have when we put a multiple choice question up. You push the button next to the letter for the answer you want to choose. And so this is our sample question, where am I? And so if you think A, you're on a virtual vacation, you should press the A button. Okay, wait till I start. But wait, you should start. Give us a second here. You can tell this is all really finely tuned. All right. So if you think it's A, you're on a virtual vacation, press A. If you think we're at an SFCC training session, press B.
And be honest how you feel.
And you see up there the indicator telling us who has pressed and who hasn't.
And Jill, about how many people do you think we have so I know when to stop?
So 60 to 70 people.
If you haven't cast your answer, please still go.
We have 55. I feel like I'm in a bingo hall. 55.
Okay, here we go.
All right. So for question number 1, 17 of you are on a virtual vacation, and the remainder are at a training session. I want to speak to the virtual vacation people after. I want to find out what your secret is. All right, so let me just give you a short introduction. It might seem counterintuitive at first, and we wish to calibrate everyone's expectations. But at the end of the day, we hope to break through the clutter and bring to the table a clear goal to achieve organic growth, empowerment, alignment, and a paradigm shift by leveraging our higher order thinking in order to move outside the box so that we can all walk the talk. But before we get into the meat of this session, we want to collect data to help us establish as specifically as possible. I'm sorry. People say that to me all the time. I don't really need a mic. My father loved opera. That's all I have to say about it. So we want to collect data to help us establish as specifically as possible, given the overall conditions, a baseline for assessing assessment, assessing attitudes toward assessment, and assessing strategies for implementing the assessing of assessment on a regular basis. So please take these questions seriously. Why am I here? Are you here for the free food? A good place to hide for a while? Or to enhance my knowledge about assessment?
Be truthful.
Okay, we're at 55.
And the answer is?
Looks like most of you are here to enhance your knowledge, although I tend to agree with the A choice.
11 of you are here just for the free food. Second question. When I hear the words assessment training, I want to A, run screaming from the room, B, find a nice comfortable chair in the back of this room and zone out during the session, C, learn more. Be honest.
There's only 34 more questions, so.
Oh, look at this one, David. Okay, 13 of you are choosing to run screaming from the room. So if you need to do that now before we start. 15, finding a nice comfortable chair in the back and zoning out during the session. And C, learning more. So if we put together A and B, there's more of you that want to leave or zone out than learning more. Hopefully we can change that. My present knowledge of assessment is A, minimal and I see no useful purpose in learning more. B, makes me feel inadequate, but I have been too busy with more important things to spend time improving it. C, makes me feel confident, although I am always willing to improve. Cast your vote. I'm sorry, there's an ABC? Oh, sorry.
You guys are the math people, right?
Okay, nice response. A is minimal and I see no useful purpose in learning more. Two of you, it's probably the same two that came just for the free food. And B and C, B makes me feel inadequate, but I've been too busy with more important things to do to improve it. And I'll be the first to tell you that I also can fall into that category. And because of that, we are really grateful that you're taking the time to be here today with us for this. And C makes me feel confident, and I want to improve. So we ask for those of you that fall into the C category to really share your skills and abilities in this area with others at your table during the work sessions. Okay, a few more questions. I think we have about 2 more questions. Assessment should be done. Now, David wrote letter A, so I'm stepping out of this one. My colleague. By faceless and humorless administrative nerds. B, only by deans, department chairs, and an SFCC assessment committee. C, by everyone interested in improving instruction and student success. Cast your vote.
We have a question here. The question was, what is the difference between A and B? I think I can answer that. I think I can answer that. Sir, the difference between A and B is that the A people are faceless.
Faceless? What's that mean? Look how slow this one's being filled in. I guess people really had to think about that one, David. Okay, and the answer is... Ooh, Zuby, was that you for letter A? Letter C, by everybody interested in student success. Okay. Assessment results in my department are often A, shelved and unused, B, kept secret, C, analyzed and utilized to improve student success at program and course levels. Cast your vote. Ooh, good response to this one.
Okay.
Interesting. Look at letter A, shelved and unused. And we really felt that that might be a response that many of you would give us on this slide. And it's really today when we can talk as an entire institution about assessment and its importance that we believe these documents that we create will no longer just be shelved and unused or kept secret, but really be used to make a success for all of us and our students at this institution. Okay, and the last question. Past participation in assessment activities have left me feeling A, that my time was wasted, B, that I had little or no voice in making a difference, C, that assessment can be a valuable tool for improving instruction generally, and in particular, my effectiveness as a teacher. Okay, again, no surprise, the letter A and B, that 19 of the responses gave us that answer. Yes, I think there are times that you have come to presentations and perhaps left feeling that your time was wasted or that you had no voice in making a difference. We really hope to turn that around today and give you a voice and the ability to make a difference in assessment. So we thank you for answering truthfully these questions.
All right, so based on the data we've just collected, adjusting for the earliness of the time of day and the lateness of the day in this very busy week, we still have compiled 2 tentative conclusions. Many of us are here today for the free food and to hide out. But some of us, at least, want to become, like me, a true assessment monkey.
Yeah, there it is. The committee's going to buy David a Fez. All right. Most of you have seen me up a couple times. My name is Jill Carlson. I'm the Director for Assessment and Accreditation. I took Karen Looper's place when she retired. So I've been here since late August. Couple more ground rules. We really want this to be a time when, as we give you this half-hour worth of work time in 3 10-minute segments, that you work together as a department, because we know that assessment is hard to get to. It's very important, but it's really hard to fit into our schedules. And then we understand and acknowledge that there are lots of different levels in the room. If you are a more experienced practitioner, help the other folks at your table. That's part of why we have them set up the way we do. So why assessment? We polled some of the faculty, and I'll just let you read the slides. And now we have Frances to talk to you with her point of view. For the video you do.
My previous life, I was an opera. It has helped me inform my teaching, my methodology, my instruments. It's also, you can change to the other, make students aware of and understand what we are assessing, what they're supposed to be learning, what are our program goals, our chapter objective, focus them and make them more self-active participant of their learning. Make them do more self-assessment of their learning so that they can improve and I can help them improve. These also have helped me give them feedback and how to improve in their learning process. And it has shown evidence of the student learning. I'm not just saying I teach this, but I'm also collecting information of how well, if they're learning it or not, or how effective I'm being or not.
So from the committee's point of view, it is a quality-based process using those continuous quality improvement tools that we're using with AQUIP and other things. And we do report the results to AQUIP, so it's also important for accreditation. That is not our primary means. We're here for the students, but that is a piece that's in there. Turn the button. So the first thing we'd like you to do is take a look. There's a group folder on your desk or your table, and inside of it are the mission statements that you wrote sometime during a fairly recent program review within the last 3 or 4 years. And in looking at them, we think they're probably a little closer to vision statements. So what we'd like you to do, we're going to give you 10 minutes to work, is start the idea of paring down a mission statement. You've all seen the new SFCC one, which is Empower Students, Strengthen Community. And so what we'd like you to do is take a couple minutes on that. And then here's some more points that we want to think about. It should be short and snappy. It should be memorable. It should be unique to your program. And it should be realistic. Once you've done this and you take it back to your departments, we suggest you put it on syllabi, you post it around your department. Let's make it a mission statement that is used. So here's your 10 minutes. Okay, if I can have your attention back, please.
Make sure you pick this email delivery.
Right. So now we ask ourselves, what is assessment? And sure, I'll just move it a little lower. Is that better? What is assessment? This is the definition that we've come up with. It's based on, I believe, Linda Susky's work, who's a fairly significant person in the world of assessment. So you're establishing clear, measurable learning outcomes, ensuring that students have opportunities to meet those, in other words, that you're teaching with the outcomes in mind. You implement a systematic process for measuring student learning, and then you use the results to close that feedback loop and make improvements. So we have 3 levels here. Institution level, Randy referenced the CSLOs, the Common Student Learning Outcomes. They're there, they're in the catalog. There is a special group working to figure out how we're going to assess those. We're going to start with the general ed stuff, and I think you'll see some work from them in a little while. If you are in math or English and you're working as we go down on this next few things, if you can keep those in mind, there's a copy of them in your personal folders. So the next level is program level. That's where we're focused today, and that's at that degree and certificate level. And then finally, you all do assessment on a regular basis in your courses. So if we can think about how to nest this in a way that is less work and more productive, I think that will help everybody. Okay, Dave's going to talk about the cycle. This is also in your folders if you can't read it on the screen. Yeah, we'll put the presentation up on Jack and let you know where it is.
Okay, give me 1 second here. I can see already, I got to tell you all, before I got into assessment at another institution, I considered it the biggest time waster in academia. What sold me on it was when I learned that it could serve a practical purpose for me as a teacher. So what is the purpose of assessment? And most of us are aware that one purpose is to allow us to show what we are accomplishing in a demonstrable way. But another purpose is to assist us in improving student learning. That means improving what we do in the classroom in as many ways as we can improve it. And so the diagram, as you can see, is a circle, although some people call it a water wheel. It's the learning outcomes assessment process. And the most obvious characteristic is it's a loop. And so when we in assessment say, or as I like to say, we assessment monkeys, say that we want to close the loop, we mean assessment results are used to guide specific actions taken to improve either the process or improve student learning. And in turn, these actions will then be assessed in future cycles in order to determine their effectiveness. So it's essentially a continuous loop, or what they call in the business world, I think, continuous improvement. So as you can see from the diagram, the first 2 steps, am I too loud? Yeah, a funny story, when I was teaching, the people in the front row would either cover their ears or move back. I really am loud. But as you can see from the diagram, the first 2 steps occur outside of the learning outcomes assessment loop itself. And it's these 2 that we're focusing on in today's session. And if you can see the writing is very small, but in everybody's individual folder, you'll find a copy of this diagram with, hopefully you'll be able to read in the little boxes. So if you haven't already, you can explore the folder that has your name on it. Everyone should have their own personal copy. In 4 weeks, we're going to go around to everybody and make sure you still have it. So the first 2 steps, again, are the ones we're focusing on in today's session. And these are concerned with the initial implementation of the whole process. So step 1 is the creation of 4 to 8 program or certificate level outcomes. And some areas have already done this. Some have done 1. we're all at kind of a different stage of the process. So we're not suggesting you have to go and do it all over. But we would like to see every certificate and program eventually to have 4 to 8 program or certificate level outcomes. And then step 2 is the mapping step, and that includes the mapping of learning outcomes to the core requirements. And it's also called course mapping, and we are going to talk about that if I can be brief here and not use up too much time. So while these are shown outside of the loop, they should still be reviewed regularly in light of assessment data and other criteria and modified when necessary. So the other steps in the loop, step 3, creating the outcomes assessment plan, whether you're going to assess one outcome or multiple outcomes per semester, and which outcomes you're going to assess and when. It's the plan for that. And the idea is you want to assess all your outcomes at least once over a 2-year cycle. Step 4 is when you establish your specific measures, the measurable instruments you're going to use to assess each outcome. And step 5, setting the targets for each measure and following outside standards where they're relevant to your program or certificate. I'm not going too fast, right? Step 6 is running the assessments and collecting the raw data, usually in a classroom, although some measures can be done outside of class, for example, exit interviews. Step 7, you're going to track and analyze the results of the assessment and then report them along with a plan for any actions, if necessary, to improve student learning in light of your assessment results. That's what sold me on this whole thing. That's what turned me into an assessment monkey. The idea that you can do assessments and that you can use them to improve your student learning. I've taught in Florida and the Deep South before I came out west. And what I found is that student populations are different depending on the institution, the region. There are some similarities, but when you're trying to reach them in a classroom, they have different backgrounds. Sometimes they even speak differently. They have different idioms, and so you kind of have to learn that if you're going to connect. And I think getting hard data, or as hard as we can make it, on how students are learning, that's invaluable. And so step 7 is where we create a plan for actions to take to improve student learning. 8, we implement those actions, and 9 is when we analyze and report those actions. But 9 is misleading, and it's misleading because the best way to analyze and report on the effectiveness of what we might have done back in step 8 is to measure those actions as part of a future assessment cycle. In other words, to use the assessment loop to see how the changes we're making are working. And this is why following a continuous cycle is so important, because by doing so we can refine our assessment plans and refine our learning outcomes to make the process more accurate and efficient by incorporating changes driven by the assessment data. And also because the cycle can suggest changes to improve student learning and also provide us with a way to measure the success of those changes. I've shouted you into quiet. Okay.
Julia and I have the pleasure of briefly discussing the topic of program learning outcomes with you. Before doing so, however, we would like to acknowledge the commendable skills many of you have in this area, and just mention that the reason that we are spending a brief overview on this topic is so that we can bring all faculty and staff to this same level of expertise that many of you bring already to the table. So let's get started. Program learning outcomes. What are they? Why are they important? And how should they be written? Let's start out with what. What are they? What are program learning outcomes? So simply, as you can read on the slide, program learning outcomes are what you intend students to be able to do, to be able to know, to be able to understand upon completion of a degree or certificate program. So for those of you that thought, wow, this is going to be a really tough topic to understand, look how simple that definition is. And let me just read it again. Program learning outcomes are what you intend students to be able to know, do, and understand upon completion of a degree or certificate program. So for example, and as I read this next sentence in red, I want you to read it to yourself, inserting the name of your discipline in that blank space. Because I'm going to be using the discipline of accounting for the example, but I want you to think about how would you answer this same completion to this question in regard to know and be able to. So here we go. Students completing a certificate or degree in, so put in the name of your degree or certificate, will. Okay, so I'm going to say students completing a certificate or degree in accounting, since I'm chair of the business department, will. So let's go to the left-hand side first, will know. What will students know when they finish this degree program? And if you think about Karen Looper, those of you that had the opportunity to know her over the past few years, this is where Karen Looper would say, what would you be appalled to find out that your students did not know how to do or did not know before they went out into the work field, representing us as an institution. So let's look at know and start in the upper left-hand corner. So in an accounting degree, what are the fundamental concepts of the discipline? For those of you that are closet accountants, correct answer could be the whole theory of the double entry system. And thanks to my quick lecture by Francis Rodriguez this morning, that's the same as debits and credits. Second one down, in the know. Students will know in an accounting degree how to generate solutions to problems that might arise in the discipline. So let's say these debits and credits don't balance. You can't just walk away from a situation like that as an accountant. So what solutions to problems like that would a student in this degree need to know? So for example, according to Francis, they would have to know, is the difference related to the problem divisible by 9? Is it a transposition of numbers? Did a student put 54 instead of 45? Is it possibly a sliding number? Where instead of putting 100, the student put a 1,000. On the be able to, going back again to the accounting discipline, but think about your own discipline as I answer this question. They should be able to communicate effectively in the methods related to the discipline. For example, being able to communicate effectively through financial reports that they may be generating for a client. Utilize skills related to the discipline. Wouldn't it be a nice concept if students graduating with a degree in accounting knew how to use Excel and QuickBooks for the clients that they are assigned to or work for? And lastly, conduct sound research using discipline-appropriate methodologies. Wouldn't it be nice if students in the accounting degree program knew how to use accounting-related databases on the internet? So even though I just gave the example of counting as a discipline, I really encourage you to answer these same questions. And many times I think we really don't go to this level when we're thinking about developing our program learning outcomes. Next one. Okay, the next question. Now that you know what they are, why use them? You know, looking at the examples here, you probably can agree and have given some consideration to some of the answers, but I just want to mention a few things about this as well. When I look at this list, help students learn more effectively, make clear to students what they should expect from their educational experience, encourage students to be intentional learners who direct their own and monitor their own learning, help faculty design, revise courses, curriculum, and programs, and make graduate skills and knowledge clear to employers. What I really see here are the same things that give us heartburn as instructors and staff, faculty and staff at this institution. That should keep us awake at night. Are my students learning more effectively? Are my students clear what to expect from their educational experience? And am I providing that to them? The last bullet really made me stop and think when I was preparing this presentation. Am I using program learning outcomes to make graduate skills and knowledge clear to employers? If you really think about it, we've done our job well when our students are employable. What a concept. Okay, next slide. Okay, Julia's going to discuss how to do it. You want to go back one slide?
Oh, want to go back to one
Yeah.
slide? Oh, yes. Hello, yes, I'm going to talk about how to do it. Now, a lot of you have already worked on program level outcomes and have a good idea of how, but a quick review is what I'm here for. So, some general statements about how to do it. You know, one is just to create statements that are student-centered rather than faculty-centered. I think most of us do that anyway, but it's a good one to keep in mind. It's interesting because these are in a different order than on my presentation, but I'm just, hang on one second. Yes, they are. So I had this little thing to say with this, but I will just move on because that one is a pretty clear cut. Another is just to create a manageable set of outcomes. You want to have enough outcomes so that it reflects the breadth and the depth of your program, but not so many that you can't sort of track them. And of course, in this assessment cycle that we'll be working with, we'll be looking at all our program level outcomes every 2 years. So we don't want to get carried away. And also, it's good if a program doesn't appear to be too complicated in terms of outcomes. They should be a little more general, not every single little detail that they will know when they leave. And then, of course, as I was just saying, you want to focus on the overarching or general knowledge and skills gained from the entire degree. Program level outcomes should be different from many of your course level outcomes. Not to say they won't intersect and there won't be some same ones, but this is what they're achieving at the end of the program, what they're able to do, what they understand, and what they know. I could get into this microphone thing. So quickly, you know how to write them. General rules of thumb, they should be observable, demonstrable, and measurable, student-centered, learning-centered. It's not about what the teacher is teaching, it's about what the students learn. So related to that, you want to use verbs that describe measurable actions. Verbs like describe, compare, apply, demonstrate. Things you can actually observe. So, I was going to talk a little bit about my moment of illumination. Am I too loud, too soft? This is interesting. I had this moment when I sort of went, aha, what I as an instructor have as a goal, which is, for example, in a lit class, to help students understand the difference between similes and metaphors, for example. is not quite the same as how I would want to phrase a measurable outcome. As an English teacher, a longtime poet, I can tell you if it's a metaphor. But how do I measure that? How do I show the students that they've actually gotten to that place? So maybe instead I say students will be able to describe the difference between metaphors and similes. Or maybe I go a little bit further and I say at a higher level on Bloom's taxonomy, which is a really nifty tool you have in your folders, students will be able to explain the difference between similes and metaphors. With explanation, which actually takes you up to what we call the top level of competence in Bloom's taxonomy, they've had to do some evaluation and actually understand it deeply enough that they can then explain it to someone else in a clear way. So here we have another example from another area of what we would call a bad learning outcome. Upon completion of the degree, students will understand basic human development theory. How do I, again, we're going back to how do I measure understanding or knowledge? Those things we want students to understand and know, but how do we measure that? Well, we change it into something like, upon completion of the degree, students will be able to summarize the major theories of human development. This, by the way, summarizes on the second level of competence in Bloom's taxonomy. It's a little bit more, it's a little deeper than simply description. And you could actually think of other things as well, but summarize, we sort of pulled it out because we thought it was nice in the way that it was slightly more than just simply to describe. Now, something I should say here, this is from the second level. The one I used in my class was from the 6th level. In general, we'll expect there to be more program level outcomes that are at a higher level than course level outcomes generally are. And I'm talking generally. So in an introductory course, maybe if students get to the end and can define a concept or describe it, this is what you want them to do. Oh, I'm sorry, am I going too slowly? Oh, sorry. Okay, somebody was doing this at me. Whereas at the end of the program, you want them, maybe it's just simply to apply it, maybe you want them to go further into evaluation. Next slide, please. Just 1 second example is, graduates of the degree program will appreciate music from other cultures. What does that mean? It sounds very good, and I hope that happens, but maybe graduates of the degree program will be able to describe and critique the characteristics of music from other cultures. That one we can actually find a way to measure in a measurement instrument. And I think that is all, unless you have questions. Thank you very much.
So in your folder, you have copies of the outcomes that are in the catalog currently. You have a couple catalogs. We would like you to leave those here at the end because I promised Teresa we'd get them back to her. Look at your outcomes. I think you'll find that a lot of the certificates do not have outcomes, and you might be able to link them. There's several work materials. We're going to give you 10 minutes to look at those, work on them. We as a committee will be working with you individually in the future, but this is a time to kind of refresh where you are.
Okay, so we're going to move on to the next step. If I can gather everybody back, we're going to move on to the next step. So you've already looked at creating your learning outcomes or revising them, looking at them again, and this is a process that should be done over and over and over. See, I always get accused of talking too loud, and I'm not loud enough now. All right, so the next step after you have come up with 4 to 8 different learning outcomes is to map your outcomes to the curriculum. And this is actually a pretty simple step. So for each degree or certificate, in your packet, you are going to have a big sheet of paper. Have my lovely assistant, Margaret. We'll call her Vanna. But on this, you're going to take those learning outcomes, and down, it would be your left-hand side, you're going to write your outcomes. And then across the top bar, write your core classes. Now, these are just your core classes we're looking at this point. And what you want to do is make sure that in every one of your core classes, you're at some point addressing one of your learning outcomes. And the way that we want you to look at that is deciding whether you are introducing your outcome, whether you are reinforcing your outcome in that class, or whether you are teaching your students a level of proficiency in the class. And the level of proficiency has been the kind of contentious point. For example, I talked with Julia and we talked with Juan about Spanish. So the level of proficiency that students leave here for a 2-year degree is what we're talking about. Not obviously fluent like you would in a 4-year graduate program, right? So we're talking just level of proficiency for a certificate level or an associate's level, whichever degree or certificate you're looking at. So any questions on that? So now we're going to give you some time to work on that.
Good morning, nice people. So I want to call your attention to these posters over here. These came from the assessment pilot project that was started 2 years ago. And a group of programs went through the first steps of assessment in that first year. And then the second year we had another group. And we don't have all of the posters that we have representing the various programs, but we have most of them. We have 8 here. I think we're missing maybe 3 or 4. I would encourage you all to wander over here and have a look, because you will see curriculum maps on these posters, and you will see the way that people have followed one learning outcome through this process. And so if you'd like a visual example of one of those curriculum maps filled out, you can have a look at these here. And we were going to try to put one at every table or move them about, but I think it's better to just leave them here and let you all come in and have a look. Okay? Thanks.
Okay, if we can bring you back together, we need to wrap this up, and we've got some closing information for you. Let me deal with a couple of nuts and bolts things. I've had some folks, we're ready to start. I need Dave's big voice. So if you need a copy of one of these posters, even if it's not your area, if it makes sense to use it, just email me. My last name is Carlson, C-A-R-L-S-O-N. I'm in the directory. I'll be happy to send it to you. You can print it locally on 11 by 17, or you can go to the print shop in the bookstore and they can do the big poster for you. And they're under $10 a piece, so it's pretty reasonable. As the committee works with each of you, we want to be creating more of this kind of material so that you can have it available in your departments. So as Dave mentioned, the next step is an assessment plan. The committee is currently developing the template for the assessment plan. So as we work with your groups, we will be working with you on that. So what we've accomplished to date, that includes the work that's been done over the past years and since I've been here. We have established a timeline for implementation, and I'll talk about that in a minute. We have the methodology, that's your learning process that runs in the cycle. We have had 13 programs complete this for one program level outcome. We need to expand that. And those programs have completed, as you can see from the posters, pretty much 1 through 6, some a little bit on 7. So what's next? In this spring, we have 12 programs that we're going to be working with on a pilot basis. Now, those are defined by who had participated before under Karen, because we want to get them into doing those other outcomes, and we want to close that feedback loop. In fall 2015, we'll have a cohort A, and then 2016 cohort B. The assessment committee will be working with you intensively. So this is kind of how assessment and program review are going to nest. So if you look at it, the program review policy this year is under development. We won't restart it until fall. We'll do data pulls. There's some really new, exciting pieces of data for you to work with. Then fall of 2014-15, then we'll do these 4 or 5 programs with program review. And then 2 years later, now this will have an assessment review nested. 2 years later, we do just an assessment review, and then 4 years again to program review. So everybody will be on that 2-4 cycle. People have asked me, well, how do I arrange how I do those 4 to 8 outcomes? We want to leave that up to you. If it makes sense to do one a semester over 2 years, that's enough semesters you can get them in. If it makes sense to run them in parallel, that works for you also. We're not going to mandate, because each department has different needs according to what their students are and how they learn. And then the group B, you can see, is the second one here, or group A, rather, and then group B. So this will be when you're working intensively with the committee. So we have received from the administration, I want to mention, ATA release time for those people who are working with the committee during a semester. So you might be thinking about that and planning in advance. We are going to put these materials up on the web so you'll have access to them. So we want to make assessment of student learning part of our everyday conversations. I think we're kind of doing that. This is just a little bit of formalization. We want to make those processes transparent. We want to implement data collection. One of the things that's going on is Susan Lemke and I are evaluating software, and we're hoping that we can find a software that will help us do the strategic outcomes and the assessment outcomes with one piece, just different halves, to be more effective and to be more efficient. And then the CSLOs, the Common Student Learning Outcomes, we're going to be working with in Gen Ed. We have rewritten the assessment policy because it's very out of date and it contains a lot of procedural material, so that'll be coming through the councils and the senates. We are aligning it, you saw that. We want to close that feedback loop. We want to focus our mission around student learning. That's why we asked you to work on your mission statements. And then we're going to celebrate our successes. So with the posters and with other kinds of things, we've got a budget for assessment now, and we'll be doing some celebrations. So do you have any questions that we can answer? There are extra copies of the materials in the folder up here if you need them. Zuby? I would think as a department, if you wanted to engage them or you have the conversations in your classes, the data that we collect is not about any specific student. We're disassociating names because this is really more about, improving things on a broader basis. However, I see no reason why you couldn't engage your students, particularly with those outcomes. Talk to them. If you have a group, you could have a focus group and have them come and look at it. If you have a way to bring in your graduates or close to graduation, you might talk about it with them and see if it's been effective for their point of view. Again, we're trying to leave as much flexibility as we possibly can to each department and program.